Veronika, welcome to the Democratizing SEO podcast. How are you doing today?
Thank you. I'm doing great.
Thank you so much for being on. You mentioned just before we started, this is your first podcast. It's all good.
It's my first podcast.
It's all good. It's just a very casual conversation between two folks. Now, today we're going to talk about core concepts of knowledge graphs.
Yeah.
And you're a knowledge graph specialist, so I thought you'd be awesome to have on the podcast to discuss a number of things around knowledge graphs, particularly core concepts. Now, you're a knowledge graph lead. How would you describe what a knowledge graph specialist does?
Well, we help our clients get structure of their chaotic data. So a typical workday for a knowledge graph developer or architect would typically be close cooperation with domain experts in order to map down knowledge, first on paper, then as structural descriptions on the computer. And we specialize the most in the RDF stack, the semantic web technologies, but we do also have a lot of competence on labeled property graphs as Neo4j and TigerGraph. But my focus is on the RDF space and the semantic knowledge graphs. And I can take an example from yesterday, perhaps.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
So currently I'm working for the maritime authorities in Norway for building machine-readable regulations as semantic knowledge graphs. And yesterday I was splitting the A-box data from the T-box data in our knowledge graph. So we're having separate ontologies or the abstract descriptions of concepts separate from the actual instance data. So I was collaborating with domain experts on archive codes yesterday, mapping what a archive code really means for the maritime authorities.
Hmm. The knowledge community is growing. What's the big deal about knowledge graphs?
What's the big deal?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, if you ask me, it's a huge deal, especially now with this generative AI hype going around. I think it's more important than ever to talk about knowledge representation. And by leveraging knowledge representation as ontologies, especially, you get also the capabilities of logical reasoning in data, since we are describing logic directly into the data layer. So we don't have to hard code logic or doing calculations in a programming interface or framework. We can do it directly in the data layer. And those capabilities I find especially important when handling predictive algorithms as large language models or other kinds of deep neural networks or machine learning algorithms that are providing you with an answer. And that answer is a predictive or a calculated set of characters, right? The most likely sequence of letters that makes up an answer based on your input. But it isn't necessarily true, that answer. It doesn't have any facts. And the LLM, for example, or machine learning algorithms doesn't have any notion of fact or what is truth or not. So therefore, I think that knowledge representation has become so rapidly popular for the past year since OpenAI came along with ChatGPT for everyone to see, that this rapid interest in knowledge representation came out of that, I believe. But the adoption of knowledge graph has been there since the 2008-10 perhaps in the industry, and the standards have been here since the mid-90s. So it isn't something new and fancy, but I think people need to pay attention, and it seems like more and more people are paying attention.
Would you say then, because of AI, knowledge graph is going to be central to the way AI is incorporated into everything we do, especially everything we do online?
Yeah, hopefully. And this has actually become my personal mission for this year to outreach this immensely undercommunicated discipline of artificial intelligence. AI isn't just machine learning. AI is a group of disciplines working towards this common goal of achieving general intelligence, right? But in order to get there, there is a lot of disciplines that needs to work in harmony. And one of those disciplines are knowledge representation, and another is logical reasoning. So I believe we have to sew these technologies and disciplines together in order to achieve artificial intelligence that we can trust, that have ethics, that have a solid foundation in facts.
For someone who's not very familiar with knowledge graphs, and they spend a lot of time online, right? So they're within the ecosystem of these big tech companies, which, let's face it, they own the online sphere, right? What are the core concepts that every single person online should know about knowledge graphs?
Well, knowledge graphs are conceptualizations of things. And things could be anything. It could be persons, it could be processes, projects, websites. I don't care. Everything are things, right? And this is what we do in the knowledge graph is actually the same thing that the philosophers of ancient Greek were doing with their caves and shadows and concepts and categories. That's what we do with the knowledge graph also. But what is unique with the knowledge graph is that we have relationships to other things, and we can describe those relationships to other things. So a knowledge graph is a dynamic model, ever expanding. We can link concepts together across any domain and as big as you want.
Big tech companies, Google, Facebook, Insta, even TikTok, they all use knowledge graphs for their public products and or services. So specifically search and or social media. What are your general thoughts on how you perceive them using knowledge graphs for these services and or products?
Well, I don't think us end users see the technology side of those services that much. Social networks are a very, very applicable use case for a knowledge graph, right? Since we have all these persons connected together across similarities. It could be persons we have as mutual connections. It could be our place of work. It could be our place, a home place where we live. It could be anything that connects people together, and that's a perfect case for a knowledge graph, of course. But whether or not we can actually see that in action, I'm not so sure. But the technology underneath makes it easier to do those connections. Also in searches on LinkedIn, for example, if you search on a company and you can see everyone who works there, where they have their offices and who they are connected to and everything. So that's a graph problem and a graph solution. With that said, some of the larger services also have knowledge graph foundations where you actually can access, for example, Microsoft and their 360 solution with Microsoft Graph and everything. But how accessible it is, I'm not sure, but they have at least those technical descriptions on how to extract information on RDF.
As an end user, a user of these services and or products, how does it benefit me? Even though I don't know the technology that they're using to service me, how does it benefit me with them, these big tech companies, using or having some sort of knowledge graph solution?
Yeah, it's the easy access of the relationships, I think, and being able to extract information from any thinkable perspective, right? You could stay on a geographical place like a city, and you can see everything connected to that city. You could see all the companies, all the persons, anything connected to that city. Or you could stay on the node that represents your friend and see all the connection that person has and what connections he has with geographical places or companies or other people. Or you can stay at the company node and see all the employees and where the company has offices. So being able to link all these bits of information together makes us also capable of extracting all this different perspective on the same data, because everything is connected and linked together.
Is it big tech that's driving the prominent use, or AI that's driving the prominent use of knowledge graph technologies? Or is it users who are seeking this information in a easy, connected manner, and big tech are picking up on this and then providing them with a solution?
Yeah, well, I can only answer that from my perspective, and I work for a big company, but I don't have that big corp view of the technology, and I don't see big companies or consultancy firms, at least, pushing this technology very much. We are pushing AI, but not communicating what AI actually contains of the various disciplines. So I think one have an outreach job to do there to communicate the various aspects of artificial intelligence, that it isn't just predictive machine learning. With that said, back to your question, from my perspective, I see the drive for knowledge graphs and knowledge representations actually mainly within public sector at the moment, to be able to describe your domain and make machine readable information models to exchange across the public sector. Because a public sector within a country is divided into many agencies and directorates. So being able to seamlessly transfer data and gather data across these agencies are a huge value in itself, to be able to improve transparency in data and be able to reduce case work time across the public sector when interacting with the inhabitants in the country, right? And the users of public services, and also exchanging information outside of a country. For example, Norway exchanging information with agencies in the European Union. So I see that semantic descriptions and knowledge representations are rapidly growing in public at the moment, in the public sector.
Google's mission is to organize the world's information and make it accessible. And from everything I'm researching, and I think it's come to prominence in recent years, especially with knowledge graphs and AI, me getting into them. I'm seeing that everything in the real world, we're going to have in the online world. And as if I put my marketing hat on, I see and I think to myself, okay, every business that has an online presence, we essentially seek traffic from these big tech platforms. And I think to myself, is there then a case why a business wouldn't want to be in the knowledge graphs of these big tech or any knowledge graph online?
And doesn't want to exchange data online with everyone? Yeah, there's a lot of companies that have highly sensitive information that needs to be kept.
Sure. Sensitivity aside, just from let's say, I'm a business that wants to attain traffic from, let's say, TikTok or LinkedIn or any social media platform or even Google search. Is there a case of me not having my details online?
I'm not sure actually if I am able to answer that particularly well, to be honest. Uh,
Because
I do know, yeah,
the only reason I can think of is sensitivity based information, right? You
yeah,
wouldn't want that in the public. But aside from that, everything else you would want in the public because it's essentially going to be to your benefit.
yeah, for sure,
Hmm.
absolutely. I think especially I'm trying to map this down to the cases I'm working on a daily basis because uh, I'm not helping clients being more present online.
Mm-hmm.
We are building internal applications
Yep.
to help them communicate with their world and their spheres, right? And making tools for employees at the agencies to interact with their knowledge base and being able to exchange that knowledge base outside of the agency as well. So we're building APIs and applications. We are not doing so much online presence in
Mm-hmm.
our daily work as knowledge graph engineers. So it's way more internally focused at our clients, but still being able to exchange information to other agencies. And in Norway, the Norwegian Digitalization Agency has published this common data catalog, as they call it, where any public agency are welcome to upload their information models and data sets described, where the metadata layer is described in the Norwegian extension of DCAT, to be able to link all these data sets together across domains and the agencies. So there you can reuse information models across agencies over that common data catalog within Norway. So that's a portal for data exchange, at least, and for interoperability and reusage of information and models.
My thinking around knowledge graphs, whether it's internal or external, or public rather, I should say, is I'm looking specifically at Google
Yeah,
and all big tech companies
yeah,
because I'm seeing big changes happening. And these changes, I'm thinking, are not just iterative one, right? They're not just small algorithmic updates. These are revolutionary changes that
yeah.
I think we're about to see online, specifically within search and social media. So I'm trying to almost extrapolate what big tech are doing from an internal point of view
Yeah.
and seeing how that reflects publicly. So, as a knowledge graph specialist, when you use, let's say, Google search or any search platform, what do you expect from them when you search for something?
What I expect, yes, I expect to find the answer I'm looking for in the first place. But I think uh, the Google search engine has become quite good as an end user. It's a you get a response in no time. That's one thing. But you also have this factual boxes, which I believe comes from their internal knowledge graph, where if you search for a country, for example, you get this fact box, as you also get in Wikipedia, right? With the main facts of the country. If you search for a person, you can also find related persons. If you search for an actor, you can find the actors that he or she has been in most movies together with, or other kinds of relations. So you see those relations everywhere in Google search, at least, is my impression. But I haven't a hands-on experience or any insight on the underlying technology within those big companies like LinkedIn or Facebook or Meta or Google, that I don't have.
When you see this information and you gather that, okay, this is coming from their knowledge graphs, can you envision a world where every bit of information come from a knowledge graph of some sort? And if that is the case, what happens when someone searches for something that these big tech do not have the wisdom for or the knowledge for?
Yes, if in some imaginary world everything was connected semantically in a knowledge graph, which was in fact Tim Berners-Lee vision with the World Wide Web back in the day, to be a huge hub for semantically connected linked data, right? Therefore, these technologies were known as semantic web technologies back in the day. So if one of these big tech companies didn't have the information we were looking for example, Google or anything, one could imagine that you were able to do federated search towards other sources of information also. Linking data together across different domains and across different industries are perhaps the most used use case for a knowledge graph, to break down the silos and to merge information together. And I believe if one source doesn't have the information, one can still stay in that source and do federation towards other sources. So connecting to separate sources to extract a factual answer that is put together by all these different sources into one.
You've mentioned a word that's just jumped out to me right there, federation.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the term federation of knowledge graphs?
Yeah, so a federated query, for me at least, there might be other definitions of that term also, but a federated query for me is that if I, for example, are working on a Sparkle query for the maritime authorities, but I need additional information about the concept, I can connect to an external service through Sparkle and extract information from that external service and put it together with my internal information to represent an answer to my client. So that's federation for me, at least.
Okay. Let me extrapolate into an area that I'm also exploring, and this is around devices. So mobiles, tablets, any device, so-called smart device. Do you think they talk to each other, i.e., share information in this manner that you've described?
If IoT devices or other kinds of devices are talking in graphs?
Not necessarily the devices itself, but the technology behind the device. So, for example, if I have a Google account, I have an Amazon account profile, and all of this is public. The non-sensitive information is public. So, who I am, where. I don't know who I am, my age, my city, just public information across these different big tech companies, platforms. Can they then share the information cross platforms?
If it's difficult for me to answer that how they work, but hypothetically, if you have a set of information that identifies a person or a entity, you could hypothetically extract that information from any kind of source that might hold that information if you had a graph structure. But how that works in real life and how these services are implemented today, I don't know. But hypothetically, again, if you have many different sources of information, if you have left your information in at Google, at Amazon, at Meta, at Twitter or X, whatever. So if you then have a node describing you, you could then use that node because that is a unique identification for you, the instance of you. And then you can use that node to extract information from all other sources also. And now we're touching upon what the Solid initiative is trying to do, right? Have you heard about Solid?
I don't think I have. No, please.
No, it's about end users or people being in control of their own data and the data they have online. It's been a while since I read about Solid last, so I don't know the latest news of it, unfortunately. But I believe this is an initiative where Tim Berners-Lee are quite heavily invested, and there is a collaboration between the business and academic spheres to work on this platform. So with Solid, you will have full control over your own data and what kind of services, websites, or companies that can have access to your data and what kind of data that would be. And that is knowledge graph based, that Solid platform.
Yeah. Wow. I'm smiling because that is essentially where I believe knowledge panels, so Google's knowledge graph specifically is headed. Ideally, you want to have ownership of it and control the knowledge graph that's shown on Google search, which is what I specialize in, which is why I'm smiling when you said all of that. Thinking from a user point of view, when you search for something and if you're dissatisfied with the result, do you blame, well, blame's quite a strong word, but who would you say is responsible for that dissatisfaction? Would it be Google search or the platform that you use to search, or the information not being accessible? So the websites, would you blame Google, or would it be websites that do not have that information that you seek?
Yeah, probably the information is out there somewhere because the World Wide Web is full of information, full of indexed information. So I will probably blame myself for not writing the best query.
Right.
Possibly. I don't think Google is to be made responsible for not putting for not extracting that information most wisely. I'm not quite sure, but the first thing that popped into my mind was that I am to blame for not writing the correct query.
Interesting. I've asked a number of people this that question or a similar question, and I get interesting responses to it because some say within SEO, SEOs will say, well, websites, they're not optimizing the sites for Google to find that information.
Yeah.
Non-SEOs, in fact, outside of marketing, would say, I blame Google because I expect Google to have that information. And it's almost a case of they expect the information on Google itself, provided by Google, and not necessarily thinking that Google has to find the information, source the information from somewhere. So in that sense, they do blame Google. So, and this is particularly from people on social media. Because when they search for something on social media, they expect the platform to provide it. And that same thinking, I believe, is applied to Google search. And then there is a small percentage of people that say, well, it's down to me, the searcher. I just need to change my query or modify it in some sense, which is what we all do in to some respect.
Yeah. So in my perfect world, I wouldn't have to write queries to Google to get answers. I would just write a Sparkle query, right?
What is
Asking for
a Sparkle query?
Sparkle is the query language for semantic knowledge graphs. So if everything were accessible over Sparkle endpoints, I would be happy. But that's just me.
Are knowledge graphs going to make the world a better, or the web a better place?
Oh yes, definitely. Yeah, I believe so. But then again, I'm quite enthusiastic about knowledge graphs, and knowledge graphs are actually the only subject matter I have been working with in my professional life. So I've been solely doing knowledge graphs for the past 10 years, and had quite a journey on doing that. And going back to the initial vision of the World Wide Web, I strongly believe that having semantic descriptions of content on websites are hugely beneficial to be able to link content together across the web, but also linking that information down to the databases within an organization, making those connections across all sources of information, both locked information like internal databases that are not exposed, but also the web.
With information, would you say there are different types of information from a knowledge graph point of view, which has more prominence? Let me elaborate on what I mean. When I think of search from an SEO point of view, these days I think of entities. And when I think of entities, I think of names, places, things, specifically people, humans. And my personal belief is that it's the most important type of information to have online, because once you know this specific type of entity, humans, people, you have access to everything that they do, right? So that gives you access to the other information or content that they produce. Am I completely wrong in this thinking, or am I onto something here?
No, you're onto something. So what we describe in knowledge graphs are usually those kinds of entities, right? And what those entities actually mean. So what is the definition of a person, a physical person? And what is the definition of a country or a place? But what we also do is defining the relationships between those entities. So what is employer, for example? What is the definition of that relationship between two persons, or a person or a company? And what is a company really, right? And what is there something bigger concept than a company? So we categorize things, put them in groups and sets of things, and we describe those sets. And we describe the relationship between all sets and entities in a graph. So we don't keep huge chunks of text in a knowledge graph, for example. We don't keep images. We don't keep PDFs, but we do reference to those kinds of information, images, videos, audio, whatever. We keep the references, and we keep the metadata descriptions surrounding that information. But the entities, I believe, is the most important things we can describe semantically in such a graph.
Wow. Okay. Knowledge graphs are making access to information free. Media, specifically media organizations, they've been massively affected by this, right? And in some ways, they were holders of this information, which is now free. In a sense, they were gatekeepers of this information. Now, on one hand, you can say, well, this was quite a negative thing, which is no longer negative because it's free. So it's a positive positive thing. On the other hand, you can say, well, it allowed people within that space to make a living. And news orgs specifically have been massively affected by information now being free online. If knowledge graphs make information so easy to access, doesn't this impact the livelihoods of people who sell information?
No, I don't believe so. You don't need to make the data accessible if you don't want to. Is my thinking. You don't need to have open APIs for everything, and we see that with media especially. Like when I got online for the first time in my life, everything was open and everything was free, right? So I could read every kind of newspaper for free online. But now you have to pay for every single article, and I believe you can do that with the data as well. Of course, I am a huge fan of opening up things, open source, and sharing information. But obviously, that's not a profound business strategy. So keeping data behind paywalls is being done, and I think we will see more of that if we're going to expose more data in a machine-readable manner. Yeah. But it's an interesting thing with media especially, and you mentioned it briefly, like the media houses and the broadcasting companies owning the source of information. And by making that available, one can twist and turn on the information and use that as a foundation to generate fake news, for example, which is kind of interesting. And I don't know if or what how to put it. It might be so having but semantical descriptions can also be twisted, right? So if you put a metadata layer on the fake news that is also fake, you get a problem. But if you are able to link back to the source of information on every single manipulation of the information, that would be interesting to see such a trace, but I don't think that's feasible in our days.
You seem to have a very keen interest on knowledge graphs. I'm curious, what is your story to how you became a knowledge graph professional?
Well, that's yes. No, I have a traditional background in computer science from the University of Oslo. I took a lot of specialization courses in mathematical logic and reasoning, and I loved working with logic. But I wondered, how in the world am I going to make a profession out of it? Because I can't write proofs and Turing machines for a living, right? So at the last semester of my degree, I got a call from a headhunter asking if I knew semantic technologies, and I said no. But I do have some friends at the university studying these things, so I signed up for a course called Semantic Technologies and realized that I can use this logic in practice, because that's what we do in a semantic knowledge graph. We apply first order logic directly in the data layer in an ontology. So this was a perfect fit, and I got that job that a headhunter was calling for. So I started working as a Java developer in projects surrounding semantic technologies, actually for a broadcasting company also, a Norwegian broadcaster, NRK, and some other clients in public sector. And then I jumped to Capgemini, where I'm now working as a ontology architect and doing enterprise architecture surrounding the knowledge graph topic, and being involved in everything knowledge graph in the Nordic countries, at least, helping out clients in finding use cases and solutions, and upskilling my teammates, and keep in touch with academia and the international knowledge graph community.
The logic is an area that a lot of big tech are focusing on, and I've noticed they have a very close relationship with academia. Computer scientists, for example, because it's an area that they're using to build what I think is the first phase right now, understanding the logic of things. If you were to project to the future, and I'll let you decide how far ahead you want to look into, what is the next stage
for knowledge graphs?
Yeah.
Well, knowledge graphs has been on quite a journey since the early beginning, and since the foundation in the semantic knowledge graph stack was standardized in the mid-90s. And as you say, it's full of logic, and it's been tightly connected to being a heavy academic field, and it's been that for quite some time. But now we see knowledge graph being adapted in organizations. And I think it was Gartner who said by 2026, was it? Or something? 80% of businesses will have implemented knowledge graph as at some point or in some form. So, and with this new AI wave we're on, I believe knowledge graphs are very important in getting truthness in AI and explainable answers in AI. And the way forward, and I also see that in the vendor landscape, supporting knowledge graphs, building knowledge graph products and shelfware and different tooling and the databases available, the vendor landscape is way much huger than just 5 or 6 years ago. So there is traction and expansion and development all over the place. So in, I don't know, 5 years' time, I think perhaps knowledge graphs would be in the foundation of any large data warehouse, of any platform, cloud-based platform, on-prem platform, tying things together. And Microsoft is currently doing that, I know. And also other data warehousing vendors are looking into using graph as this semantic layer, this fabric that holds everything together within the platform. So I think we will see a huge or a more rapid adoption, perhaps, but it might not be that we see it as end users or as developers, for that matter. There's a lot of vendors that has built a wall around its knowledge graph, right? But they are using a knowledge graph to making their products perhaps better or more productive. But that we as end users or developers don't see that knowledge graph adoption firsthand, I think. The hidden graphs.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
Veronika, I want to end with this question. And this is the problem solving of knowledge graphs. And I want to look at it from 3 different points of views. So big tech, users of the products and or services that big tech have, and also businesses that rely on traffic from big tech. So with the first, big tech, what problem does knowledge graph solve for big tech?
I think having having all kinds of domain knowledge linked together. I think it's the main beneficial and the most easiest one to achieve also, linking all these sources of information within that company together on a conceptual level.
What problem does knowledge graph solve for users that use products and or services from big tech that have a knowledge graph?
Well, it's also just guessing from me on that part, but I believe that by having all this information linked together, you can easily trace anything and extract information from any perspective, as we talked about earlier. I think that's a huge benefit for the end user also, not just to have a siloed view on the world, but actually being connected with everything and being able to trace those connections as far as they go.
For businesses, what problem does knowledge graph solve for businesses that want to attain traffic from these big tech companies?
I think it's much of the same, actually. At the end, it's not really that huge a difference from a consumer, because end users like you and me and businesses are just consumers of information, right? And we consume information from different perspectives, but it's still information and still data. So I believe that the value of connecting things lies in those perspectives and being able to trace information in long lines from any kind of perspective and having that full picture of things.
Completely agree. I think from a marketing, if I was to put my marketing hat on, I see big tech treating end users and businesses within the end users essentially as the same. In other words, on social media, whether you're a marketer or a business or just a user, you're considered an end user, so to speak.
Yeah.
Veronika, thank you so much for your time today. Where is the best place for people to find you online?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm quite active there, at least, or on X, I believe. Best ways.
What types of conversations do you like to have?
I love nerding about knowledge graphs and knowledge graph use cases and ontology building and knowledge graph capabilities.
Awesome. I'll have those links in the description so people can get in touch with you. Veronika, thank you so much for your time today. Have a brilliant day, and thank you for your explanation of core concepts of knowledge graphs.
Thank you.